Great episode of Steelfur Speaks. We're going to talk about scandals around the UK National Championships. We're going to talk about the new meta, like Oldhim. Hey guys. Um, and then we're just going to have a ramble because it's been a while since I did an episode. So let's have a bit of a chat. So yeah, coming to you live from the new Oldhim meta. Old people are in. Old people are cool. Old people are winning everything. That sounds kind of just like a good way to be in life. Let's start off just because I had it up on my screen anyway. I was looking at it. Let's just start off with a plug for Metal Fab tokens. I own these ones. These ones he gave to me free to show on the channel. They're really nice. I have two of these. Pick them up at a big event if you can. It saves on shipping, but otherwise, if you really want tokens, they're pretty cool. He's got Steam counters, Frost Hex counters. I mean, you can't really get better than stuff like this if you're tracking frostbites. I mean, they're detailed, they're inscribed, they're really cool. I am not in any way sponsored by him or anyone, in fact. So if you want to sponsor me, feel free to get in touch. I definitely do not go to as many events as I could have because I am not paid to attend. But anyway, my point was that those tokens are really cool. I have some. I think they're pretty useful, pretty neat. Obviously, dice do the job, so don't feel like you need flashy tokens. But there are some of you out here, and you know who you are, who need the shiny tokens. Anyway, we are here then instead to talk about national championships. Oldham's kind of been winning. Surprised? I'm not particularly surprised. Oldham was always a good deck. Really just held back by the fact that he auto lost to Prism. Second that Prism went out of the meta, then really that was kind of all she wrote. It was time for Oldhim to reign supreme. Not that he has been winning every single national championships. Let's be important. He's won a decent chunk of them. One national championships he did not win was the Vietnamese national championship, which rather interestingly, and actually this is very interesting, was actually Blitz. Oldhim came second, but Oldhim did not win the Vietnamese national championships. Now, I reached out to the Vietnamese community. I was like, that's weird. You got to do Blitz while everyone else had to do CC. Like, who instigated that? What was the story? How did that come about? Now, apparently, Blitz is just the best, most popular format in Vietnam. Apparently, their player base is made up mostly of students and people with low disposable income who are much more comfortable buying a Blitz deck than a CC deck, and getting that extra copy of the chase cards and things like that. And they just prefer Blitz. It's faster, it's more engaged, they get tournaments done quicker, all these kind of things. So Blitz is really the most popular format in Vietnam. Remember, Vietnam's still a very small community. And they said, when we started doing CC events, half the people showed up because the other half didn't want to go and get that extra card. So, they were allowed. They reached out to LSS when they were talking about their national championships and said, look, people play Blitz here. People don't show up for CC. We're not established as a CC meta yet. Can we have a Blitz national championship? And LSS said yes. And it's brilliant, right? 100%. Like, the community in a country said, this works better for us. Can we do it this way? And they're still putting forward a competitive scene and a competitive event feel. There is an argument the Blitz Nationals is not as competitive as a CC one, but then equally, if you're talking about, a 25, 30 person event in Vietnam open entry event in Vietnam compared to a 90 person qualification required event in the UK, you already have a massive gap in terms of competitiveness of the event. So letting them do Blitz isn't going to make that event that much less competitive compared to, the different ways it's already unique in terms of size and shape across the world. It just means that it's much more accessible to the actual community and serves the actual community. So, before we get into talking about meta decks, you can see I've loaded up quite a few of them here. Let's talk about UK Nationals, right? And I want to be very careful with how I talk about UK Nationals because a lot of stuff has happened this week. And I kind of want to put it all in context for our foreign friends over there before they kind of lose their head at things I'm about to say, right? So, a few things have been happening in the UK this week. You may or may not be aware. Last Friday was announced or last Thursday was announced the passing of our, our Queen, Queen Elizabeth II. Rest in peace and all of that. She, longest reigning monarch in British history, 75 years. 75 years. She reigned. Her reign started in 1938, I believe. That would make it 74 years. Anyway, someone will do the math. We definitely had her platinum and diamond jubilees, so I think she made it to 75 years on the throne. Took the throne at a young age of 22 or 23, I believe. Died when she was 96. So, basically she was our monarch for almost a century. She survived World War One, where everyone will know she served as a mechanic. Through all of the Cold War and all of this kind of stuff, she has been a constant. She has been certainly the Queen in the UK for my entire life. Now, I am mostly Irish, but I'm also like half English, so I've kind of lived in both countries for about equal parts of my life. But I've been in the UK for the last 10 years, so I'm British enough to care about the Queen, but not British enough to go crazy for the Queen. Not like I'm Irish enough to not go crazy for the Queen. All right, let's put that in context. So, how do I like? A lot of people have been saying, and I kind of this all of this stuff about the Queen is important to the flesh and blood discussion, but they've kind of been saying, how, especially in the flesh and blood community, people have been like, well, how are you responding to the Queen's death and stuff like that? And what you kind of have to understand is that it is a very much like intellectual thing rather than necessarily like a personal grief. Certainly for people like me, I didn't know the person. I didn't have a relationship with them. I'm not personally sad as to their passing. But intellectually, when the figurehead who's been the head of your country for 75 years, who's been a constant, dies, that is worth acknowledging, and that is worth, saying this is a monumental point of our history and being a bit intellectually sad, and also respecting the grief of other people in your country who are more sad, who are willing to queue up for 10 hours to pass by her grave and all these kind of things. So we're very much in the school of doing that here in the UK, even though I, for example, am a Republican. I believe very simply that there should be no office in the land that exists that cannot be elected. Very much believe in the Irish model. I was convinced years ago by someone who I was in debating society with. We had a very heated discussion about it. And actually, I was convinced that, if a kid wakes up tomorrow and wants to be the president of Ireland, and take on all the ceremonial roles, that should be a life goal that they can aspire to. And someone cannot aspire to be the next king or queen unless they get really lucky and get to marry the person who's next in line of succession, which is let's call it a long shot. Anyway, my point is that is all going on. So we have the context of the Queen's passing. The country is getting a bit weird because we haven't done this in 75 years. And when we last did it, for context, there was we barely had TV. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have, people didn't have phones in their houses. Like, the world was a completely different stage. So no one really knows how to do a royal funeral in the UK to the extent that we haven't had to do it in quite a long time. There's currently I think 8-hour queue. It's 4 miles long through central London, which is important in terms of context. And the government reckons another maybe 2 million people will come to London this weekend. Right. Why is this relevant? Well, guess where the UK National Championships is being hosted? In London. And guess where this procession's happening? Right. So let's get open Google Maps. Let's just do some explaining for everyone, right? So, I live over here, by the way. I live in a nice bit of East London. The funeral essentially is happening here, so in Westminster Hall by Big Ben. The queue runs... This is Big Ben, by the way. You can see it lovingly rendered in 3D, so you can have a bit of a look. They've done that for Big Ben. Have they done it for anything else? Ooh, they did it for Westminster Abbey too. Okay, cool. So if you look at this building in the background, in the Houses of Parliament, that's Westminster Hall. It's where many notable sort of monarchs are entombed from history. Not many recently, but we've decided Queen Elizabeth is good enough. The queue from there runs all the way across the river, down here past the London Eye, all the way along the riverbank, along Southwark Bridge, London Bridge, and currently, as I understand it, the queue reaches. It's the Tower of London, by the way. The queue reaches here, right? Tower Bridge. Okay, all the way along, and it finishes. This is the start of the queue. When the queue reaches here, no one else will be able to join it, right? The queue is currently somewhere about here. So the queue is currently 4 miles long along the riverbank, getting to here. Now, where is UK Nationals being hosted? Okay, the answer is over here. So in Shepherd's Bush, over to the left, UK Nationals is actually just being hosted. We have the exact location. It's being hosted in here in the W12 shopping centre, which is where Darksphere is. So you can see that while they're not like next door to each other, they're not actually that far away, right? The distance between Buckingham Palace driving is 40 minutes, give or take, but that's probably because of the traffic. Cycling, more accurate, 24 minutes. Walking should be about an hour. So we're talking about an hour's walk, and there are other palaces and things that will bring people further over towards Shepherd's Bush, right? So this is important because if 2 million people are showing up to try and get in here, then every single hotel and venue and everything around here is going to be full. Every single restaurant is going to be full. Every single place is going to be full. So what happened with UK Nationals was that in the face of this, the store and LSS talking together, and we'll talk more about the language that both have used because it gets a bit confusing. But the store and LSS together decided on the Tuesday before the event to postpone UK Nationals by 2 weeks until October the 1st and the 2nd. Now, this is problematic for a few reasons. The first reason is obviously, maybe you guys don't know this, but in the UK, most hotel bookings come with somewhere between 3 to 5 days refund window before the actual stay. Some are right up until the day, but usually it's like if you want right up until the day, you pay an extra £80. And if you want like 3 to 5 days before, you don't pay extra. So a lot of people book like a 3 to 5 day window on their hotel. So the fact that it was announced on Tuesday for a stay on Friday meant that a lot of hotels weren't refundable. And we did a survey, and I think amongst our community, and there were about 35 people who couldn't refund their hotel, which, given those hotels were costing about £300, which is central London prices, is about £9,000 of player money in the UK just gone in a heartbeat, right? That's important to understand. It's also important to understand that for anyone who hadn't booked yet or anything like that, the prices would be stupidly high. And for anyone who had problems that had to rebook or cancelled and had to rebook, the prices would also be ridiculously high. So it's important to put that in context that when this happened, the UK Nationals was screwed, right? Regardless of whether it goes ahead that weekend or cancelled, the Queen dying means UK Nationals is screwed. Loads of people coming to London, the city getting very congested, and all of those problems we had to deal with. But, and here's a big but, this is kind of far enough away that if everyone's staying here, we can potentially get away with running it anyway, right? Now, the store didn't necessarily agree. They were worried about it. They were like, let's push it 2 weeks. But I think they underestimated the number of people who had non-refundable flights and hotels, people coming from Scotland and Wales and further away. Remember that the UK is quite a large country when you get down to it, and if you're flying from, we have players up in Edinburgh, up in Inverness. This is about £150 flight. This is about £100 train, not return. So, there is a lot of expense involved with traveling in the UK, and a lot of people don't get refundable tickets, right? So that's kind of like the problem. So the problem is all of these people coming to London. The problem is hotel costs and everything going crazy. The problem is just like, delays on the tube because it can only handle certain numbers of people. All these other kind of things could go wrong. But something that was guaranteed to go wrong was that the money these people spent wasn't refundable. So on Tuesday, the store puts out a note saying we're postponing it. Quite a lot of people who had unrefundable hotels were like, please don't do this. And then LSS hadn't announced anything at this point. It was just the store doing it. LSS hadn't made an official announcement. Then the store said, let's do a survey. We need your responses by 10:30 on Wednesday night. And then we're going to go back and figure out what we want to do. Now, the majority of people in the survey voted to go ahead on the same weekend, right? So scrap the cancellation. Obviously, some people had already cancelled their hotels. Those guys were a bit, in a bit of rough situation. Okay, so there's kind of a few things happening here. So after taking all the surveys and deciding that all these people wanted it to go ahead, the event has actually been rescheduled for that weekend. So it is actually going ahead as planned on the on this weekend, right? So it is actually going ahead this weekend. Everyone who had non-refundable hotels and trains is happy. Everyone who refunded their trains is unhappy and hotels is unhappy due to the increasing costs. For example, a hotel that would normally cost €130 in London costs, for example, €700 this week specifically, because they're trying to make a mint from people coming in to see the Queen. Okay, so what do we think is actually going to happen this weekend? It's really hard to say. There's already a 4-hour queue, and this is a queue that people have to take. Sorry, an 8-hour queue, a 4-mile queue. This is a queue that people have had to take annual leave to come to. But I'm personally of the opinion that we might be okay. And the main reason is, and this is something maybe people who don't know about London very well. So the main lines that are going to be affected by this queue are actually the Jubilee line, right? The Jubilee line and the District line. So on the one hand, you've got the Jubilee line, which runs right near the start of the queue, the South Bank Park. And then you've got the District line, which runs on the other side of the river. A Circle line as well that runs on the other side of the river. So these are going to be the two main affected lines, with a bit of a spillover into the Northern line, which runs here in the city, and a bit of a spillover as well into like Waterloo Station and the big stations, right? But Shepherd's Bush is on the overground, and Shepherd's Bush is near the Hammersmith and City line, and which goes around the north side of the city, and Shepherd's Bush is near the Central line, which goes through the centre of the city. Now, London's typical approach to large public events, like, for example, I've been to the fireworks at the London Eye. The London Eye is this big roller coaster we have here. This whole river will be filled with about 1 million people. The typical approach to central London, the Tube, is basically to close these stations, right? Close Temple, close Embankment, close Westminster, close all of these stations. And if you want to get to where the event is on, you have to walk from this outer ring of stations, right? Aldgate Tube, Elephant and Castle, Victoria, St. James's Park. Basically, you have to walk about 25 minutes, 30 minutes in the direction you need to leave the city in before you can get on a train. And this inner ring of stations is just closed to stop people overcrowding those stations. That way, the crowd in central London is dispersed before it reaches the edges, right? So really what's going to happen is there's going to be a ton of people here. There's going to be a ton of people getting on these tube lines and getting off in these different places to try and get there. But actually, if you're on the central line, or you're on the overground, or you're staying near the venue where a lot of people from out the country are, you may actually find yourself relatively okay. Because these middle stations are going to be exit only. Which means if you get on over here, onto the central line, you're actually going to be able to whiz through the centre of the city. And if you get on the Hammersmith and City line, you can go around the north where less people will be. And if you get on the overground, you can go around the north as well. And then there's a few other ways, like the Piccadilly line might be a bit grim. But again, if you start up in the north or the south and you try and come in, you should be fine. So actually, we have a pretty concrete plan of how this is going to look. And really, I would say to people who are looking to come to the event, I would leave an extra at least half an hour, maybe an hour to get there. Don't leave it last minute. Expect delays. But the best thing to do is just to go, because too many people have spent too much non-refundable money. Now, I know hopefully this London transport lesson has interested you. If it hasn't, we'll talk about actually what's been sort of causing problems at the level for me. Cancelling an event 3 days before is just not on, really. Better to go ahead and be delayed and struggle, as long as it's safe to do so. Even if some people can't get to the event, if most of them can and it's safe to get them there, like, they've already paid for things, you can't cancel things at such short notice. It's just not, it's not practical from the community perspective. It's not practical in terms of how much money people have already spent on all of this. And it's just not good. Okay. And even now we're running ahead with the event. Like, they've cancelled all of the side events. Like, they're deliberately doing things to make like, you know, less people come. And some people have booked tickets just for the side events. We were supposed to have like Team Sealed, Team Blitz, Team Constructed. All of that has been cancelled. All of the drafts and things like that have been cancelled. The PTI is still happening on day 2. But the fact is that, like, a lot of what made Nationals like fun and was bringing a lot of people down has gone from the event. And it feels like it was kind of ripped away at the last minute. And what this has done in the UK has kind of brought to the surface a lot of sentiment. And I've said this to LSS directly, so I don't mind saying it here. I put it in my feedback to them because I sent them an email about this because a lot of people were annoyed. It's brought together a lot of sentiment in the UK of just not being happy with LSS's tournament scheduling and like communication, specifically around like big events in the continent. Because traveling to continental Europe is quite expensive if you're in the UK, unless you're given quite a lot of notice. And also just like scheduling and knowledge of events and where things are going to be when you're trying to qualify for them. So, for example, for a lot of people in the UK, stuff like the callings this year were just announced too late, or they would have gone to like calling Utrecht instead of calling Madrid if they had been given an option, but they didn't know that calling Utrecht was a thing until after they had booked tickets for calling Madrid. Or they would have gone to the Pro Tour in Lille instead of Utrecht, but they didn't know it was happening until after they had booked tickets for Utrecht. A lot of that has been causing a lot of consternation, and a lot of and the whole RTN season in the UK as well was very frustrating because we didn't know where our nationals was going to be. And a lot of people kind of said to me, I wouldn't have gone and spent so much money, like £200, £300, £400 going to all these RTNs to get my top 4 if I had known that Nationals was going to be in London, because I can't afford to go to London for a weekend on top of everything else. So the fact that people don't know where the event they're qualifying for is a big deal. Same with the Pro Tour. Like, a lot of people in the UK felt annoyed because they had put in a lot of time to qualify for the Pro Tour, but they weren't told what weekend it was on or the location it was on, even if it's just like, well, it's in France on this weekend, right? Or it's in this city on this weekend. Then they couldn't book time off, or they couldn't book flights with enough notice. And what this recent problem has done is just brought that knowledge to the fore, where a lot of people are expressing their general frustration at LSS. And kind of, this has kind of revealed that a lot of people are starting to lose faith in LSS in terms of like trusting them with their time and money when it comes to events, right? And what I mean is that, like, people are less likely to go to 4 RTNs and spend £400 traveling to them, or £200 traveling to them and on event entry, if they don't trust that LSS is going to honor their time commitment by making nationals, like, you know, in a place, like, in a way that respects their time. And by that I mean, like, scheduling it 3 or 4 months in advance so everyone knows exactly where it is and where it's on, and what it looks like. Scheduling it in a place that's more immune to disruption, though, I mean, you couldn't predict the Queen dying, but London isn't particularly immune to disruption, whereas somewhere like Milton Keynes, that's further out of the city, is more immune to disruption and has a lot of events venues. So, things like that, that's kind of, and it's also cheaper for a lot of people in the Midlands to get to somewhere like Milton Keynes, which is a big deal for them too. So, all of those are kind of pretty big factors. But I think it's a general concern. We'll take it from the sentiment of the UK community, and I think we can extrapolate a bit of concern. And I've expressed the concern to LSS, so I don't mind saying it. Just a bit of concern worldwide for the same thing, that people are starting to worry just based on scheduling and stuff like that, and ask the question if LSS is, respectful of their time and understands like their needs, as because most of the people playing this game are adults. They're people with families, work commitments, and all this kind of things. Whether LSS understands their needs for pre-warning, and also just an idea of giving people choice as to where to spend their money, rather than maybe harnessing the FOMO of, oh, here's the next event, here's the next event. There are a lot of people who kind of felt like this year we ran from calling to calling to calling to calling. And they wanted to go to all of them because every time a new calling was announced, they got a bit of FOMO. And that is a good way to sell event tickets. But those same people also are coming to me now, after the year and saying, actually, I'm a bit burnt out of Flesh and Blood events. I don't think I'm going to go to any next year. Right. So that's kind of where we are in the context of, if you don't publish that schedule in advance, if people can't choose the event they want to go to the most and instead just end up FOMOing into all of them because of how they're announced, then those same people, are not going to, they're not going to be as receptive to Snap announcements the next year. They really want to sit down and plan their year. And no one suffers more from this. Well, maybe not no one, but I have someone a friend of mine, Jason Hamer, who's been so committed to Flesh and Blood from the very start in the UK. He's the guy who got me into the game, and he went to the first Pro Tour. He couldn't do Lille. He didn't have enough notice. He went to some of the callings, but he hasn't been able to go to a lot of them. He did have enough notice. If Nats had been rescheduled, he wouldn't have been able to go. Like, there's just so many things that because he has more of a family, more of an important job, all of these responsibilities, where he can't go to as many of these events because he's not being given enough notice. And not to put Jason on the spot, there are lots of people in a similar situation to him, but he's someone that I hear it from quite a lot, that he loves to go to these events. He loves to participate, but he doesn't always feel like he can, because there's just there are windows where he can't do things, and he's not being given enough notice to plan around those, right? Anyway, let's move on from that. So that's kind of what's happening. UK Nationals is going ahead. It's going ahead despite the fact that all these millions of people are coming to London to see the Queen. Hopefully it will not be too disrupted, though all of the side events being cancelled means there will probably be less people in attendance. It will be more of a focused event. Though LSS did add a last-minute LCQ on the Friday night, which no one knew about until 2 days ago. Maybe that's to counteract the fact that less people are going to be coming because of all the disruptions. But, we're doing a Blitz LCQ on Friday night to qualify people for a CZ Nationals the very next day. And I think only the top 4 people from the LCQ get in, which is, it seems a bit weird. I think if you know that your Nationals is going to be less than maximum attended and you have 96 slots, then you really should fill to the 96 rather than just say let the top 4 through. I mean, if there's 20 people missing from Nationals and 20 people show up to the LCQ and really want to play, I just say let them play myself. It doesn't really dilute the tournament. If they're not that good, they won't win. They won't win out. But, when something like this happens, you make the tournament more accessible, right? That's how you solve it. You get more people in. You apologize to people who got screwed over by giving them something or making it up to them by making the tournament more accessible. So, like, for example, if you couldn't play inside events now because they're all cancelled, but you could show up to the last chance qualifier and just get a slot because there were enough slots going, then suddenly you don't feel as bad about the last chance qualifiers. Anyway, Nationals is going ahead. It will likely be disrupted. It will likely be delayed. It will likely be running late. There is a stream by the lovely people at Tabletop 24 who stream a lot of content and gameplay from the UK. So I fully recommend you chime in and watch that. They will be commentating. There will be great discussions on. I, for one, am very excited about it. So that's going to be good. I am also casting a Nationals. I am, for some reason, getting up at 5:30 in the morning next weekend to cast the Hong Kong National Championships, but they asked, and I felt like I could enjoy casting some Fab next weekend, so I'm going to be casting that. It's going to be fun. In the meantime, let's just talk a little bit now before we wrap up about, because that discussion took way longer than I thought it would, about just the decks that came out of Nats. I mean, Viserai came in second somewhere. It's a pretty standard Viserai list. Lots of Shrill. Not the Belittle list from the first Pro Tour, which is not really that surprising. I mean, this is still quite a good list. We had an Icelander that did quite well in Australia as well. Icelander's kind of putting in the numbers now, though she's not necessarily as consistent as people would like. You do need a lot of reps to make her work. And she does sometimes brick, but obviously if enough Icelanders show up to a tournament, you will get Icelanders making the top cut. Icelander is also quite good into some of the other decks like Oldhim and Viserai, though it doesn't necessarily always beat those decks, which is a pretty big deal. Sometimes Oldhim can just smack it around, so can Bravo. We have a Kano up there. Things are getting a bit crazy in Australia. Lots of Oldhims winning. A Dromai won. This Dromai list is a bit fun. It has a lot of reds, a lot of attack actions, a lot of go again. It's very much an aggro Dromai list, though it does run a bit of a blue pivot into Ghostly Touch, which is obviously very important in the Guardian matchup to be able to eventually use Ghostly Touch and Semblance to combo out a huge like 20-30 damage attack that they will kill the Guardian after they spent the whole game popping all of your runes. And then obviously we have Oldhim coming in first in a lot of tournaments. Now that Prism's gone, Oldhim has kind of taken over. There are a few variations on Oldhim. Some are running more heave, more aggression, more zealous belting. Some are running more control, more defensive. Like in Lithuania, the guy was running Tome of Fiendal, to gain life, so he could do a bit of a... Ooh, sorry. Do a bit of a sort of block and control and life gainy pivot, or an aggro pivot, depending on what he needed for his decks. And we see, people winning with Briar still, setting up big turns, double Channel Mount Heroic, back-to-back Channel Mount Heroic turns, where they keep it around for 2 times to get rid of the Oldhims. There's just a lot of scope. I will say, this is kind of what I expected when Prism went out of the meta. I kind of expected that Oldhim would come up to the fore because there are a lot of aggro decks and Oldhim is very good into them. But I will say that, I also didn't expect that Oldhim would just outright dominate everything, and he hasn't done that. He has been very strong. He has been winning national championships, but I think it is a close race in that the national championships he have won. It's very rare that we see Oldhim coming in second. There have been 1 or 2 Oldhim finals, like in France, there was an Oldhim final. But typically it's Oldhim going into his, we'll say negative matchups like Icelander and Dromai, and pulling out a win through player skill or through a nice bit of the old luck, or just through, getting good in that matchup. So I will say that, it doesn't feel like the gap between, say, Oldhim and the other decks in the format is so large, though he is probably one of the best decks in the format. So if you're going to your nationals this weekend, I know a lot of people will be interested in this discussion. Expect to see a lot of Oldhim. Expect to see a lot of Icelander because she's very popular. Expect to see a lot of Briar because it won the Pro Tour, and people are playing that little Briar list that Matt Fawkes was on. And just expect to see a lot of that kind of stuff. Oldhim, Briar, and Icelander. To a certain extent, if you're playing Oldhim, you should expect to run into a few Dromais. I will say that Dromai is one of the most rep-intensive decks that I know, so I wouldn't necessarily count on them being good Dromai players. That's something you won't really know until you get to play against them, but it is definitely a consideration. Are they good or are they bad Dromai players? There's a lot of scope to be good. There's a lot of scope to be bad with Dromai. It is a very, very good player. Or as my friend Jamie Faulkner, who obviously you guys know from Top 18 or Calling with Dromai, would say, Dromai is that sort of deck where you can make a mistake 15 turns ago and then you realize that you lost the game 15 turns ago because of that mistake. Now, maybe he's exaggerating for hyperbole, but that sounds like a pretty drastic statement to me. So yeah, that's the meta. That's what's happening with UK Nationals. I know a lot of people have been asking me questions about that and wants to understand what's going on, how much the Queen dying actually matters to us. And it varies really much person to person, how much it matters to you as an individual, how much it matters to the country. There's a lot of stuff a lot of stuff being disrupted. And for example, a lot of stuff closing. So for example, McDonald's is closing on the Monday. There's lots of other places closing on the Monday so that the staff can go and pay respects or just watch the funeral or something like that, right? So as a country, we are in mourning. Some of us aren't particularly sad. Some people are very sad. All in all, most of us are genuinely intellectually sad at the idea that this person who was in charge for 75 years is gone, but we will still go ahead with nationals, and hope that the tube network holds up, it isn't too disrupted, and hope that we can all like get home afterwards and get to the event on time and all that other kind of stuff. As it is, 100 people in a room in London is a drop in the water compared to everything that's going on, so we should be able to sneak by under the radar. But if you are in the UK and you are coming, I would leave extra time for your event. Otherwise, it's going to be a fantastic event. I'm super happy. I'm playing. Again, I've been getting more reps than I had for the Pro Tour in Lille. Remember I said I went to Pro Tour in Lille with 5 reps. I'm going into this National Championships with about 25 or 30 with the deck I'm playing, which I won't spoil, but I have played a lot more games with it. I have a lot more reps. I'm still not confident on it completely. I don't think I've got enough reps and enough practice into every matchup, but I'm feeling much better than I was going into Pro Tour Lille. And that is good. I will say I still don't feel like I have practiced enough. Work has been popping off, and I've had a lot of travels to do, including Lille, including going home to visit my family, and visit Dublin and some friends in Dublin. So I haven't really played necessarily as much as I thought I would, but I also have tomorrow off, and guess what I'm going to be doing tomorrow? I'm going to be playing some Flesh and Blood. So I will see you all on Talishore Online tomorrow. Thank you all for listening, and I hope if you're having your national championships this weekend, you have a great day, and I hope that it runs smoothly. And if you hear about ours not running smoothly, then please just, send us your best wishes, because we're probably all going to be stuck on a tube train, crowded with our faces in people's armpits and everything going everywhere, and miss round 1 and lose, ELO and lose the tournament, But, if you lose round 1, submarining is a very valid strategy. So, lose round 1, win the tournament. It can be done. And yeah, otherwise, I will give you my tournament report as always once I finish the event. So either Saturday or Sunday, depending on how well it's going. I may be out of the event by Saturday. I shouldn't really. I mean, I'm probably, if not, one of the top 5 players in the UK. I think I'm probably within the top 20 or 30 at least. So, I should hopefully make the day 2 of the National Championships at least. If not, make the top 8. And that's how we're going to go. So, rooting for me. The only other update, really, for those of you still listening, is that I'm probably not going to be in attendance at Worlds unless I win a PTI from Nationals. I don't have a PTI. I was considering buying one. I got a price for £400 for one, which was perfectly reasonable. But when you add the £400 to the cost of the flights and the hotels and stuff like that, it just started to add up to a bit more than I'm comfortable with. Late in the year, especially heading into this energy crisis that they keep talking about in the UK, which won't affect me hugely because I've got a good job and I have a well-insulated house. But, it is worth just being a bit cautious when the government tells you that, the economy is going to go to hell and you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't spend that money going to America. But also there's a conference that I have to be on the Tuesday after this Sunday of the National Championship. So I would have to fly into London and then immediately fly to France, which would be very, very tricky jet lag wise and work wise. So if I get a PTI from Nats and I win enough money to cover the cost of the flights, or if someone randomly gave me a PTI, maybe I'd consider going to Worlds. But as things currently stand, I probably am not going to be attending Worlds unless LSS want to hire me to commentate or something. If they did, I would 100% be there. But as it stands, I'm probably not doing that. So yeah, that's where we are right now. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Steelfur Speaks. I, of course, have been Steelfur, aka Finbar. Really enjoying getting back to making more regular content now the summer is starting to cool down. Now that I'm getting back into the swing of things with Flesh and Blood. The break was very much needed, and in fact I may go on another mini break if I'm not going to Worlds, but I'll still be doing content and looking at the meta, just sort of chilling out and maybe not playing as much, and enjoying a break, maybe to go into the new year with a fresh bit of will for the Dynasty meta and to really, start stomping people. We do know there will be a Pro Tour probably in Q1 or 2 next year. The ProQuest have already started being advertised for it at like the Callings and the Battle Hardens in Belgium. There will be a ProQuest, and obviously if you have a ProQuest, you have to have a Pro Tour. We don't know where it is yet, but that will be very exciting when it comes around. Speak to you all soon, and have a great week.